Inaya Cross sat across the glass table from Kwon Do-hyun, and the only thing between them was 32 pages of legal language and one silver pen. Her spine was straight. Her hands were flat on her knees, still, like she'd rehearsed this 100 times in the mirror. Maybe she had. Do-hyun hadn't touched his copy of the contract. He turned the pen over in his fingers instead, slow, like he had somewhere better to be and wasn't in a hurry to prove it. "You're sure," he said. "I signed worse things for less money." "This isn't about money." "Then what is it about?" He didn't answer. The city sat behind him through floor-to-ceiling glass, Seoul lit up gold and white 40 floors down, and for a second neither of them said anything at all. Somewhere below, a siren passed and faded. Inaya reached for the pen first. His hand closed over hers before she got there. Not rough. Not gentle either. Just final, like a door shutting. "Once you sign this," he said, "there's no version of your life that doesn't run through me. You understand that?" "I understand that my ex is going to lose everything he built on my name." Her voice didn't shake. "That's the only part one care about." Something moved behind his eyes. Gone before she could name it. He let go of her hand. She signed. The pen scratched loud in a room that quiet. When she set it down, her fingers weren't as steady as they'd been 30 seconds ago, and she pressed them flat against the table so he wouldn't see it. He saw it. Do-hyun slid his copy toward himself, folded it once, and stood. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Kwon." The words landed like a verdict, not a welcome. Inaya watched him walk toward the private elevator, jacket over one shoulder, not looking back to check if she was still breathing right. She looked down at the contract in front of her, really looked at it for the first time since she'd walked in an hour ago, promising herself she'd read every line. One clause near the bottom of page 19 was highlighted in yellow. She didn't remember highlighting it. She didn't remember it being there at all. The elevator doors closed behind him with a sound like a held breath finally let go, and Inaya sat alone in a penthouse that legally, as of 90 seconds ago, belonged to her too, staring at 4 lines of text she was almost certain hadn't existed when she'd started reading this contract an hour ago. 6 months before the penthouse. Before the pen. Before any of it. Inaya Cross had a corner office on the 31st floor of a marketing firm she'd helped build from nothing, and a fiancé who told everyone at the engagement party that she was the smartest woman he'd ever met, and lucky for him, she loved him anyway. The room had laughed. She'd laughed too. Bellamy Ross had a way of saying things that sounded like compliments and worked like leashes. She didn't see it then. She saw it in pieces, later, the way you see a crime scene, one detail at a time, each one making the last one worse. The first piece, her signature, on paperwork she never remembered signing, moving 40% of her firm's client contracts into a shell company with Bellamy's name quietly buried in deep layers down in the ownership structure. The second piece, her father's retirement fund, the one she'd managed for him since his stroke, gone. Not stolen loudly. Drained slowly, one wire transfer at a time, over 14 months, while Bellamy told her father he was helping her handle the investments so she didn't have to worry. Her father had trusted him. That was the part that still didn't sit right in her chest, even now. Her father had looked at Bellamy across a dinner table and decided he was the kind of man you handed your future to. The third piece was the worst one, and she found it by accident, a voicemail Bellamy forgot to delete from a burner phone charging on his side of the bed. A woman's voice. Young. Familiar in the way people become familiar when you've seen their face in your own house, refilling wine glasses at your own engagement party. He said once the merger clears and her name's off the paperwork, we're done pretending. Inaya played it 4 times before she understood what pretending meant. Then she played it once more, just to be sure her own life hadn't tricked her. She didn't scream. She didn't throw anything. She opened her laptop and started building a folder. By the time Bellamy noticed she'd gone quiet, really quiet, the kind of quiet that isn't sadness, he'd already lost the merger, lost the woman on the burner phone to a better offer somewhere else, and started telling people at the office that Inaya had had a breakdown and wasn't handling the pressure well. He said it convincingly. People believed him. That was the thing about Bellamy, he never told a lie so big it needed defending. He told small ones, over and over, until they became the only version of events left standing. Her father's fund never came back. Her name stayed on 19 months of legal paperwork tying her to fraud she never committed. The firm she built went to a man who barely remembered her legal name by year 2. She kept the folder. Inaya didn't go looking for a mafia boss because she wanted danger. She went looking for danger because the version of justice available to ordinary women wasn't going to touch a man like Bellamy Ross. Courts needed evidence clean enough to survive a defense attorney. She needed something that didn't ask permission. She needed someone Bellamy couldn't outtalk. That's how a woman who'd never once in her life sat across from organized crime found herself asking a stranger with a scar above his eyebrow how she might get an introduction to Kwon Do-hyun, a name people in her world only ever said in the same breath as a warning. The stranger had laughed, low, like she'd asked something genuinely funny. You know what that man does to people who waste his time. I'm not planning to waste it. The mutual enemy's name was Udo Kessler, and he ran the kind of nightclub that didn't appear on any map worth trusting. Inaya found him through 3 separate introductions, each one costing her something, a favor, a lie, a night she didn't sleep. Kessler had lost a shipping contract to Bellamy 2 years back under circumstances he still called theft and everyone else called business. That made him useful. It didn't make him safe. He looked at her over a glass of something dark and expensive and said, "You want Do-hyun to notice you. Understand something first, that man doesn't do favors. He does trades. Bring nothing, and he sends you home in one piece if you're lucky. I'm not asking for a favor." Then what are you asking for? A husband. On paper. Long enough to bury a man who deserves it. Kessler didn't laugh. That told her more than his warning had. He made the call. The meeting happened 4 days later, in a restaurant with no name on the door and a single table set for 2 in a back room that smelled like cedar and rain. Kwon Do-hyun was younger than the stories made him sound. Late 20s, early 30s, maybe. A suit with no wrinkles in it, heavily tattooed hands that stayed still on the table the whole time she talked, dark eyes that gave her nothing to read. She'd rehearsed the pitch on the drive over. She didn't need it. Bellamy Ross ruined my name, my father's savings, and the company I built from nothing, she said. I want him ruined the same way. Publicly. Financially. Completely. I can't do that alone, and I don't have anything left to trade with you except my own reputation, which I'm told is worth something in your world if we're seen together the right way. You want a fake marriage. I want a weapon that walks and talks like a wife. His mouth moved, not quite a smile. And in exchange? You tell me the price. She expected a number. She expected land, favors, silence about something buried in her past he'd already dug up before she sat down. She'd built 3 separate counteroffers on the drive over, ready for whatever he asked. 1 year, he said. My name. My house. In public, you don't leave my side without my knowledge. In private, you owe me nothing you don't choose to give. That's it? That's it. Too easy. She heard her own instincts say it before her mouth could. Why would you agree to something like this for nothing? I didn't say it was for nothing. He stood, buttoning his jacket, done with the conversation before she decided it was over. I said the price wasn't yours to worry about yet. He left her sitting there with a business card and no explanation, and Inaya turned the card over 3 times in her hands looking for a catch she couldn't yet name. My lovelies, a man like Kwon Do-hyun doesn't say yes for free. Somebody's paying for this. Drop your theory in the comments before the next scene, because you are not ready for what's actually on that contract. Later that night, back in her apartment with the lights off and the city loud outside her window, Inaya ran his name through every database Kessler had given her access to. Kwon Do-hyun. 29. Took over the family business after his father's death, 4 years ago, under circumstances the official record called natural causes and 3 separate unofficial sources called something else entirely. 1 line, buried in an old society column from 6 years back, stopped her scrolling. A photo. A gala. Bellamy Ross, shaking hands with a much younger Kwon Do-hyun, both men smiling for a camera neither of them knew would still exist a decade later. She sat with that photo a long time before she closed the laptop. Whatever happened to Do-hyun's father, somebody official already looked, and decided not to ask twice. Whatever this arrangement actually was, it hadn't started with her walking into that restaurant. It started somewhere long before, in a photograph she wasn't supposed to find this fast. The contract arrived in 3 parts, over 3 days, each one heavier than the last. Her lawyer, a woman named Priya she'd hired off a recommendation from someone who owed Kessler money, read through the first 30 pages and set her pen down twice. This is unusually generous, Priya said. For him. That's what worries me. It should. They went through it line by line. Property clauses. Public appearance obligations. A non-disclosure section thick enough to choke on. Everything read exactly the way Do-hyun had described it across that table, 1 year, his name, his house, nothing owed in private she didn't choose to give. Priya flagged 4 sections for revision. Do-hyun's people accepted 3 without argument and rewrote the 4th within an hour, faster than any negotiation Inaya had ever sat through in her life. They're not fighting you on anything, Priya said, frowning at her screen. That's not normal. Maybe he doesn't need to fight. Maybe he already got what he wanted somewhere I haven't found yet. Priya didn't have an answer for that. The morning of the signing, Inaya stood in front of her closet for 11 minutes deciding what a woman wears to marry a stranger for revenge, then put on the black dress because it was the only one that didn't feel like a costume. The car Doohyun sent arrived silent, driver silent, tinted windows silent. Seoul went by outside in strips of gray and gold, and Inaya kept her hands folded in her lap the whole ride, running the contract's language through her memory one more time like she was checking for a trapdoor she'd already stepped past. She hadn't found one. That didn't mean it wasn't there. The penthouse elevator opened onto the same room Priya had flagged in a video call 2 days earlier, glass table, floor-to-ceiling windows, the city already lighting up gold below even though the sun hadn't fully gone down. Doohyun was waiting. No lawyers in the room this time. No witnesses but the two of them and 32 pages between them. "Where's your legal team?" she asked. "I don't need them for this part." "Convenient." "Careful," he said, and there was something almost warm in it, gone as fast as it came. "You start sounding like someone who doesn't trust me." "I don't." "Good. Trust wasn't part of the deal." He slid the final copy across the table. She'd read every page twice already, marked every clause Priya had cleared, memorized the language until it stopped meaning anything at all, the way words do when you repeat them too many times. What she hadn't done was read page 19 a third time, after the last revision came in at 11 the night before, too tired and too wired on coffee to catch that one paragraph had shifted position in the document. She signed the way she'd rehearsed. Steady hand. No hesitation she'd let him see. He signed after her, unhurried, like the outcome had never been in question. "Welcome to the family, Mrs. Kwan." She'd hear those words again, she already knew she would, some part of her cataloging this moment as one she'd replay, but right now all she could do was watch him fold his copy and rise, jacket over one shoulder, already halfway to the elevator before she'd fully processed that it was done. Alone, she looked down at her own copy for the first time since signing it. Ran her finger along the edge of page 19 the way you'd touch a bruise to see if it still hurt. The clause was there. Highlighted in yellow, same as before, for lines near the bottom she was almost certain hadn't existed in the version Priya cleared 48 hours ago. She read it once. Read it again. Her hand went flat against the table, the way it had the first time, except this time there was no one left in the room to hide it from. The first real damage came from a phone. Not hers. Sangmin's, one of Doohyun's men, the quiet one who filed paperwork and rarely spoke at dinner. He set it on the kitchen counter in front of her without asking permission first, like he already knew what she'd do with it. The information on Bellamy came from a woman named Yuna, who ran logistics for one of Doohyun's shipping contracts and had, it turned out, dated Bellamy's business partner for 8 months before he dropped her for someone younger. "Your ex-husband's acquaintance has had this for 2 years, Sangmin said, sliding a folder across the counter. "Never had anywhere to put it. Now she does. He was not my husband." "Not yet he wasn't," Sangmin said, and left the room before she could ask what that meant. Inaya opened it standing up. "Didn't sit down for this one. Emails. Dates. A second set of books for the property fund Bellamy had used to bury the money he'd taken from his father's old partners, the same fund, she realized halfway through page 3, that had quietly financed the house she used to think of as home. Her hand didn't shake reading it. She noticed that the way you notice weather changing, not a feeling, just a fact about the air. "This is enough to end him," she said. "It's enough to start," Sangmin said, turning his head to her from the door frame. "Ending him takes longer." She scrolled through 4 months of Bellamy's transfers before her coffee went cold. 2 shell companies. 1 payment to a woman whose name she didn't recognize, routed through an account meant to look like payroll. She took a screenshot. Her hand didn't shake taking it. That surprised her more than the numbers did. Doohyun found her still at the counter an hour later, phone gone, laptop open, a legal pad covered in her own handwriting. "You didn't sleep." "I don't need to sleep. I need his lawyer's name." He gave it to her. Didn't ask what for. That was the part she was still adjusting to, how little he asked, how much he simply handed over, like her war with Bellamy was something he'd budgeted for from the start. "You're good at this," he said. "At ruining someone? At finding the exact spot that bleeds." She looked up at him. He wasn't smiling. He rarely did, and when he did it never reached anywhere near his eyes, but this wasn't that, this was something closer to attention, like he was recalculating something about her in real time. "Careful," she said. Almost sounded like a compliment. Wasn't. He left before she could decide if that was a lie. She learned to do it in pieces after that. A leaked detail to a journalist who owed Doohyun a favor from 4 years back. A quiet word to an investor whose daughter went to the same school Bellamy's did. Nothing traced back to her. Nothing had to. Doohyun watched her build it without offering to build it for her. You could just tell me what you want done, he said, one night, watching her mark up a printout at the kitchen table with 2 different colored pens. I don't want it done. I want to do it. Most people in your position ask me to make problems disappear. I'm not most people in my position. He didn't argue that. She caught him looking at her a beat longer than the moment required, the same look from the counter weeks earlier, recalculating, quiet, unfinished. By the 4th week, Bellamy's permit stalled. By the 5th, 2 investors pulled out within 3 days of each other, no explanation given because none was owed. She watched the numbers shift on a screen that had nothing to do with her name on it and felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled since the day he left her with nothing. Not peace. Just proof. Proof that she hadn't imagined the size of what he took. She watched it happen from a distance and felt something she hadn't expected to feel this soon. Good. Not vindicated. Not healed. Just good, the way winning feels before you count the cost of it. The gala was Do-hyun's idea, or maybe it was never his idea at all, maybe it had been decided before she signed anything, another line item in a contract she hadn't seen. The choice were old money, older than Do-hyun's family, and they didn't trust anything they hadn't tested themselves. Mrs. Choi found her by the bar within the first 10 minutes. You married fast, she said, in English, watching Inaya's face instead of her drink. We didn't see the point in waiting. No. I imagine you didn't. Mrs. Choi's eyes went to Do-hyun across the room, then back. He's never introduced a wife to anyone before you. Not once. Not even the ones he was serious about. Maybe there weren't any worth introducing. Mrs. Choi laughed, short and real. Careful. That almost sounded like you know him. Do-hyun crossed the room before Inaya had to answer that. He put a hand at the small of her back, easy, unhurried, the kind of touch that didn't ask permission because it had done this before, 100 times, in front of 100 rooms just like this one. Mrs. Choi. You're terrorizing my wife. I'm testing her. How's she doing? Better than you deserve. Mrs. Choi's gaze cut to Inaya one more time, sharp, assessing, then softened into something almost like approval. Keep her close, Do-hyun. Ah. The good ones don't stay if you don't. She walked off toward the next conversation. Do-hyun's hand stayed at Inaya's back a beat longer than the moment required. You passed, he said. Did I have to? If you hadn't, we'd be having a very different conversation right now. He said it lightly. She didn't believe the lightness for a second. She found the office by accident, looking for a bathroom on the floor below the party, and stopped in the hallway because she heard her own name. Sangmin's voice, low, through a door left open 2 inches. She still doesn't know how it started. You want to keep it that way? Do-hyun's voice, quieter. She doesn't need to know yet. Kessler's people are asking why you agreed so fast. 6 years you turned down marriages from families worth 10 times what she's worth, and then some woman walks in through a favor and you say yes in one meeting. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? A pause. Long enough that Inaya stopped breathing to hear through it. I knew who she was before she ever walked in, Do-hyun said. I knew who her ex-husband was 4 years before that. She didn't find me, Sangmin. I made sure there was a door for her to find. Inaya's back hit the wall behind her, quiet, controlled, the same way she'd learned to fall in dance classes as a child, absorb the impact, don't let it show on your face. The words didn't land all at once. They landed in pieces, the way bad news does, first just sound, then meaning, then the specific shape of what it cost her. She didn't go in. Didn't trust her face yet to hold whatever it would do walking through that doorway. She turned back toward the party instead, spine straight, one hand still pressed flat against her sternum like she could keep the next question inside her chest by force. Why? She didn't have an answer waiting on the other side of it. Just the sound of her own heels finding the marble again, steady, controlled, carrying her back into a room full of people who had no idea the ground under one marriage had just shifted without anyone in it agreeing to it. She picked her champagne glass back up off a passing tray. Drank from it like her hand wasn't the only steady part of her left. She started packing 4 days before the contract technically ended, which told her something about herself she didn't love, that some part of her had already decided before she'd let herself think it through. 1 suitcase. Nothing he'd bought her. The black dress stayed on its hanger. Priya called on the 3rd day. Legally you're clear at midnight on the 14th, she said. No penalties, no clawbacks, nothing in the language that holds you past the date. You checked page 19? 3 times. It's a standard morality clause. Nothing that survives past termination. Inaya looked at her own copy, open on the bed beside the suitcase, page 19 highlighted in yellow same as the day she'd signed it. Read it to me again. Priya read it. Word for word. It sounded exactly like what Priya said it was. It didn't feel like that anymore. Inaya. Priya's voice changed, careful now. Is there something in there you're not telling me? No, Inaya said, and didn't know until the word left her mouth whether it was true. She hadn't told Doohyun she was leaving. She didn't have to. He knew the way he knew everything, early, quietly, without asking. He found her the night of the 13th, standing in the closet doorway with the suitcase already zipped, and he didn't say anything for a long moment. Just looked at the bag like it was a person who'd insulted him. You're really doing this? That was the deal. Was it? 1 year. You said it yourself, at the beginning. Nothing owed after. He crossed the room slower than she'd ever seen him move, and stopped close enough that she had to tilt her head back to hold his eyes. Where will you go? Does it matter? It matters more than you think. He said it flat, no performance in it, which was somehow worse than if he'd raised his voice. Bellamy's people put a car outside your old building 3 days ago. Sat there for 6 hours. Left when mine showed up. Her stomach dropped in a way that had nothing to do with him. You're lying. I don't lie to you. I just don't tell you everything. He tilted his head slightly, watching her absorb that distinction. There's a difference, even if you don't want to see it tonight. How long have you known? Since before the wedding. The suitcase felt suddenly stupid at her feet, a prop from a scene that had already ended somewhere she hadn't been paying attention. Say it, she said. Whatever you're not saying. Say it now. Your ex has been trying to find out where you sleep for a year now. My men have been the only thing standing between him and an address. He let that sit before he added the rest. Not because of the contract. The contract stopped being the reason a long time ago. Then why? He didn't answer that. He looked at her the way he had the night of the gala, recalculating, except this time he didn't hide that he was doing it. Midnight's in 9 hours, he said instead. Take the bag if you still want to. I won't stop you. He left the room before she could ask the only question that mattered, whether won't meant can't, or whether it meant something closer to a door being held open by a man who was betting, quietly, that she wouldn't walk through it. She sat down on the edge of the bed next to the suitcase and didn't move for a long time. She didn't sleep. She sat with the suitcase until 4 in the morning, then unpacked exactly one thing, her passport, and put it in her coat pocket instead, like she needed one door left open even if she wasn't sure yet which side of it she wanted to be on. At 6, she found him in the office downstairs. He hadn't slept either. She could tell by the second cup of coffee going cold beside the first, both untouched, and by the way his shirt was still the one from last night. 9 hours, she said. You said 9 hours. 6 now. Tell me the rest of it. He looked at her for a long moment, like he was deciding something that had nothing to do with her question. Sit down. I don't want to sit down. Sit down anyway. She sat. Not because he'd asked. Because her legs had started doing that thing again, the fine tremor she'd hidden at the signing, and she didn't trust them standing. Doohyun pulled up something on his laptop and turned the screen toward her. Photographs. A black sedan outside her old apartment building. She recognized the crooked number on the door across the street, the one that had been broken since before she moved out. Timestamps across 6 different nights. Bellamy's driver, Doohyun said. Same car every time. He stopped once your building manager mentioned my name to the doorman. Started again 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago I filed the complaint against his construction permits. Yes. So this is my fault. This is his choice. Don't hand him yours. He said it fast, sharp, the closest to angry she'd heard him get about anything that wasn't business. You didn't put him outside that building. He did. She stared at the photos until the car in them stopped looking like a car and started looking like a threat she'd been too busy winning to notice. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have stopped going after him? She didn't answer, because they both already knew what the answer was. That's why, Doohyun said. You needed to win this your way. I just made sure you didn't get hurt doing it. That's not in the contract, she said. Protection. That's not a clause. No. Then why? He closed the laptop. The city was still dark outside the window, that particular hour where Seoul goes quiet before it doesn't. I told you once. Trust wasn't part of the deal. He said it slower this time, like the words meant something different coming out a second time than they had the first. I didn't say nothing was. That's not an answer. I know. Doohyun. You want the truth, or you want the version that makes tonight easier? I've had a year of the version that makes things easier. I'm done with that one. He almost smiled at that. Almost. The truth is I've spent 6 years turning down women whose families could triple what I already have, and none of it ever felt like anything but math. Then you walked in through Kessler wanting to destroy a man I already had reasons to hate, and it stopped feeling like math within a week. He watched her take that in before he kept going. I don't know what to call the rest of it yet. I know I'm not letting Bellamy near you while I figure it out. The suitcase was still upstairs. She hadn't decided anything, not really, not with words, but her hand had stopped shaking somewhere in the last 4 minutes and she only noticed that now, looking down at it flat against her knee. 2 hours, she said. Contract's still up in 2 hours whether you figure it out or not. I know. That's not a yes to anything. I didn't ask for one. He stood, jacket over one shoulder, same as the day of the signing, unhurried in a way that had stopped reading as arrogance somewhere in the last 5 minutes and started reading as something closer to restraint. Midnight already came and went for the reasons that used to matter. What happens after that's up to you. Not the lawyers. Not the clause. You. He left her alone with the laptop, the cold coffee, and 2 hours she suddenly wasn't sure she wanted to spend the way she'd planned to spend them. The suitcase was still by the door at 11:40. She stood in front of it the way she'd stood in front of her closet the morning of the wedding, except this time there was no black dress to make the decision simple. Do-hyun didn't come find her. That was new. Every other deadline in this marriage, he'd been the one setting the terms, the one crossing rooms toward her like the outcome was already decided. Tonight he stayed downstairs, and the not coming felt louder than anything he could have said. She went to him instead. He was at the window when she came in, jacket off, tie gone, the city doing its gold anglass thing 11 floors down like it did every night whether or not two people upstairs were deciding something that mattered. 18 minutes, she said. I know. You're not going to ask what I've decided. No. Why not? He turned from the window. In this light his face gave up nothing, not the calculation from the gala, not the almost smile from that morning, nothing she could read and use the way she'd learned to read every other room in her life. Because if I ask, it becomes my answer. I want it to stay yours. He said it quiet, no performance under it. You've spent the last 5 weeks letting me hand you things. Bellamy's ruin. Protection you didn't ask for. A name that isn't yours. I'm not handing you this one. That's convenient. Making me carry the whole weight of it. It's the opposite of convenient. Convenient would be me telling you to stay and watching you do it because I said so. His jaw worked once, small, the only tell he had left. I don't want that version. I've had 6 years of people doing what I say. I know exactly what that's worth. She looked at the suitcase through the doorway behind her, then back at him. Bellamy's still out there. Yes. You'll still be protecting me either way. That's not conditional. No. That part isn't a choice. That part's already done. He said it like a fact he'd stopped needing to explain. What happens after that's the only thing I don't already have an answer for. 12 minutes now. She could feel the number the way she used to feel exam clocks in school, that specific pressure behind the eyes. Ask me the real question, she said. Not the contract one. The one from this morning you didn't finish. Something shifted behind his eyes, brief, gone before she could name it. What do you want, Inaya? Not what you're owed. Not what makes sense on paper. What do you actually want? The room went very quiet. Somewhere below them the city kept moving, cars and lights and 11 million people who had no idea a marriage was ending or continuing 11 floors above their heads in the next few minutes. She opened her mouth. What came out, he heard first. She watched it land on his face before she'd even finished the sentence, watched something in his jaw let go that had been held tight since the morning he found her packing. She said the words. The room didn't. Cut to black on the exact shape his face made hearing them, the kind of look a man doesn't let anyone see unless the answer just changed something he'd stopped letting himself hope for. She didn't remember what she'd said. Not exactly. Just the shape of it, the way you remember the second before a car accident, better than the impact itself. What she remembered clearly was his hand, finally, coming up to her face like he'd been holding it back since the gala, since the office, since maybe the first night at that glass table with 32 pages between them. Neither of them said anything else that night worth repeating. Morning came with Sangmin at the door, which was how she knew something had gone wrong before either man said a word. Bellamy filed something, Sangmin said. This morning. Public record. Do-hyun's face didn't change. That was the tell. He'd stopped bothering to hide reactions from her weeks ago, so the absence of one now meant he already knew what was coming. Filed what? Inaya said. Sangmin looked at Do-hyun first. Do-hyun nodded, once. A civil suit, Sangmin said. Fraud, embezzlement, breach of fiduciary duty. Names 4 companies. He paused. One of them was your father's, boss. Before. The room went still in a way Inaya had learned to recognize, the stillness before Do-hyun said something that mattered. Before what? She said. Before what, Do-hyun? He sat down across from her at the same table Sangmin had left the phone on 3 weeks earlier, the one where all of this started, and for the first time since she'd met him he looked like a man choosing his words instead of already knowing them. "Bellamy didn't start hurting people with you," he said. "He started with my father's company. 11 years ago. Before either of us knew the other existed." "That's not possible." "It's very possible. My father trusted a partner who trusted an accountant who moved money through companies with names that don't matter now. One of them was Bellamy's father. When the old man died, Bellamy inherited the company, the debts, and every trick that built both. You knew this. This whole time. I knew it before I knew your name." He held her eyes steady, no performance in it because there was nothing left to perform. "When Kessler brought me your situation, I didn't say yes because I liked the shape of the plan. I said yes because I'd been looking for a door into Bellamy's finances for 6 years and you walked in holding it." Something cold moved through her that had nothing to do with the room's temperature. "So I wasn't the plan. I was a door. You were both. I didn't expect the second part." He said it plainly, like a man reporting a fact he still didn't fully believe himself. "That's the part one didn't put in any contract." She went upstairs after that. Not to pack. Just to be somewhere with a door she could close. Her copy of the contract was still on the desk, page 19 still marked, and this time she didn't just read the clause. She read the clause with the fact of Doohyun's father sitting behind every word of it, and the sentence rearranged itself into something she hadn't let herself see the first 4 times. In the event either party develops feelings inconsistent with the contractual nature of this arrangement, the marriage shall be considered binding beyond the terms stated herein, superseding Section 4. Not a morality clause. Not a standard language Priya could wave off in a phone call. A trap he'd built into his own contract, aimed at himself as much as her, months before she'd ever said a word to him she meant. She sat with that for a long time. Long enough that when he knocked on the door, she almost didn't hear it over the sound of her own pulse. "Bellamy's suit isn't the last move he has," Doohyun said through the door. "He's going to come at you directly. Soon. I need you to know that before anything else happens between us." She looked down at page 19 one more time. "You wrote this," she said. "This clause. You wrote it before you ever met me." Silence on the other side of the door. Long enough to be its own answer. "Yes," he said finally. "Why?" "Because I already knew what I was risking the first time Kessler said your name to me. I just didn't think I'd lose that particular bet this fast." Bellamy's move came 2 days later, and it wasn't legal paperwork this time. He came to the penthouse lobby himself, no lawyer, no driver waiting outside, just him, in a suit that used to fit better, telling the front desk he was there to see his wife. Security called upstairs before he finished the sentence. "You don't have to see him," Doohyun said. "I know. Inaya." "I know, Doohyun. I'm going anyway." She rode the elevator down alone. That part she insisted on, and he let her, which told her more about how far they'd come than anything he could have said standing next to her in that lobby. Bellamy hadn't changed much. Same watch, cheaper now maybe, same way of tilting his head like he already knew how the conversation would end before it started. "You look good," he said. "Marriage suits you. What do you want?" "I want you to know what you did." His voice stayed level, reasonable, the same tone he used to use right before he did something unforgivable and called it a misunderstanding. "4 companies, Inaya. My father's name. My kids' school fees. All of it, gone, because you married a gangster to feel powerful again. You lost that company because you stole from people who trusted you. I just made sure someone noticed." "Did Quan tell you that? Or did you figure it out yourself, before you decided to marry him too?" She didn't answer. That silence cost her more than she expected it to. Bellamy leaned in slightly, lowering his voice like he was doing her a favor. "Ask him why his family cared about my father's old company for 11 years before you ever existed. Ask him what he actually married you for." "I already know." "Do you?" He almost smiled, the old smile, the one she used to mistake for warmth. "Ask him anyway. Watch his face when you do." He left without waiting for security to walk him out. She stood in the lobby a long moment after the doors closed behind him, replaying every word looking for the lie in it and not finding one clean enough to stand on. She found Doohyun on the balcony, the city already gold below them, same as every night, same as the first night, except nothing about tonight felt the same as anything before it. "Was any of this real for you?" He turned. Whatever he saw on her face made him set down the glass in his hand without drinking from it. "Which part?" "Any of it. The wedding. The gala. The morning you told me to choose. Or was I always just the door into Bellamy's finances, and everything after that was you managing an asset?" His hands weren't steady. She noticed that before she noticed anything else, the same hands that had been so still across a glass table the day she signed away a year of her life, shaking now over nothing heavier than a wine glass. "The door was real," he said. I won't lie about that. I said yes because of my father, because of 11 years I spent watching that man walk around free while people who trusted him lost everything. He came closer, slow, like he was giving her every chance to stop him. But somewhere between the signing and the gala, I stopped checking whether Bellamy's ruin was finished. I started checking whether you'd come home. That's not an answer to my question. It's the only one I have. His hand came up, not quite touching her face, waiting. Ask me if I regret it. Go ahead. Do you regret it? No. No hesitation in it. I regret that you had to hear it from him first. She looked at his hand, still hovering, still asking permission it had stopped needing weeks ago. He's not finished, she said. Bellamy. He came here for a reason tonight, and it wasn't just to plant doubt. I know. Then what happens now? Do-hyun's hand finally closed the distance, settling against her jaw, steady again, or steady enough. Now we decide together, he said. Not because a contract says we have to. Because I'm not doing this any other way again. Below them the city kept moving, the same as it had every night of this marriage, indifferent to the fact that somewhere 11 floors up, two people had just stopped pretending the choice in front of them was anything but the only one that had ever mattered. Bellamy didn't come back to the lobby. He didn't need to. The call came at 2 in the morning, Sang-min's name on the screen, and Do-hyun was already out of bed before the second ring. Say it, he said into the phone. Inaya watched his face while he listened. Whatever Sang-min told him took the color out of it in stages, like watching a photograph develop in reverse. Where? Do-hyun said. Then, how long ago? Then nothing, just his jaw working once, the same tell from the office weeks ago, except this time it didn't stop. What happened? She said, sitting up. Bellamy's not at his apartment. Hasn't been for 6 hours. He was already pulling on a shirt, movements sharp, none of the unhurried calm she'd gotten used to. He wired the rest of what he had left into cash yesterday. Every account we'd already frozen, everything he could still touch, he pulled before anyone noticed. That doesn't sound like a man planning to disappear quietly. No. Do-hyun looked at her, and something in his face made her stomach drop before he said the rest. It sounds like a man with nothing left to lose looking for the one thing he thinks still belongs to him. Me. Yes, you. Security found the first sign at 4 a.m., the doorman at her old building, the one with the crooked apartment number across the street, calling to say a man matching Bellamy's description had been asking which floor she used to live on, like 48 weeks of marriage hadn't already erased that address from anywhere it mattered. He's not thinking straight, Inaya said, watching Do-hyun coordinate with Sang-min over 2 phones at once. That's not a plan. That's a man falling apart in public. Falling apart men do the most damage. They've stopped calculating the cost. By 6, they had eyes on him, a car matching his rented sedan, parked 3 blocks from the penthouse, engine running, going nowhere. He's not coming for the building, Do-hyun said, reading something on his phone Inaya couldn't see. Security here's too tight and he knows it. He's waiting for one of us to leave. Then we don't leave. You don't leave. I have somewhere to be this morning. I can't move. He caught her look before she could argue it. Court filing deadline. If I don't respond by 9, the countersuit loses 6 months of ground we can't get back. Bellamy knows that too. That's why he's out there right now instead of tonight. So this is exactly what he wants. You gone, me here. I'll have 4 men on this floor and 2 more in the lobby. That's not the same as you. No, he said. It isn't. He left at 8:40. She watched the car pull away from the window, the same window they'd stood at the night she asked him if any of it was real, and felt something close to dread settle behind her ribs that had nothing to do with contracts or clauses. The call from Sang-min came 40 minutes later, breathless, cut short. He switched cars. We lost him 4 minutes ago near the intersection Do-hyun's route runs through. Her hand went flat against the counter, same as the night she'd found the 4th clause, except this time there was no page 19 to blame it on. Get him on the phone, she said. Now. He's not answering. Then get me a car. Mrs. Kwan, our orders were. I don't care what your orders were. Her voice came out steadier than she felt, the same steadiness she'd learned signing a contract months ago for a war she thought she understood the shape of. Get me a car, or I find my own way down there. Sang-min didn't argue again. Whatever he heard in her voice told him arguing would cost more time than it saved. The elevator doors closed on her reflection, and for the first time since the wedding she didn't recognize the calm on her own face as something she'd rehearsed. It was just there now. Hers. Somewhere across the city, a man who'd built his whole plan for revenge around a piece of paper was about to find out what happened when 2 people stopped needing the paper at all. The intersection was already full of flashing lights by the time her car got there. Not Bellamy's car. Do-hyun's, pulled half onto the curb, driver's door open, the front bumper crushed against a delivery truck that hadn't been there in any version of this morning she'd imagined. She was out of the car before it fully stopped. Do-hyun. He was standing upright, one hand braced against the wrecked door, a cut above his eyebrow bleeding into his collar, but standing, and the relief that went through her at that single fact nearly buckled her knees. "I'm fine," he said, before she'd asked. "He ran the light trying to force us off the road. Hit the truck instead." "Where is he?" Do-hyun's face answered before he did. She followed his eyes to the ambulance already parked 20 feet away, doors open, 2 paramedics working fast and quiet the way people work when the outcome isn't in question anymore. "Bellamy," she said. He didn't make the turn. She stood very still. Waited to feel something enormous, grief, or relief, or the satisfaction she'd been chasing since chapter 1 of all this, and instead felt only the small, specific fact of Do-hyun's hand finding hers, steady despite the blood on his collar, and the sound of traffic starting to move again around a scene that had already stopped being about her. The paramedics said he was alive. Barely. A shattered leg, a head injury they wouldn't commit to a timeline on, and by the time Anaya sat in the hospital waiting room 3 hours later, still in yesterday's clothes, she understood that whatever came next would not be the ending she'd spent a year rehearsing. Priya found her there around noon, laptop already open. "The countersuit's moot," Priya said. "Bellamy's lawyers are already talking settlement. Whatever happens with the criminal charges, the civil case dies the second his family agrees to liquidate what's left. And the money he moved before all this? Frozen. It'll take months to untangle, but it's frozen." Priya paused, watching Anaya's face. "You don't look like a woman who just won." "I don't feel like one." "What do you feel like?" Anaya looked down the hallway toward the room where Do-hyun sat with 4 stitches above his eyebrow, giving a statement to 2 detectives with the same unhurried patience he'd used across a glass table the first night she met him. "Like the war's over," she said, "and I don't know who I am without it." They released Do-hyun that evening. He didn't say much on the ride home, and she didn't push him to. Some silences didn't need filling anymore. It was 3 days before either of them said Bellamy's name out loud again. "He'll recover," Do-hyun said, reading something off his phone at the kitchen counter, the same counter where all of this had started with Sangmin setting a phone down without asking. "Enough to stand trial, eventually. Fraud. Embezzlement. Attempted vehicular assault, once the police finish the report." "Good. You don't sound like you mean it." "I mean it." She did, mostly. "I just thought it would feel bigger than this." He set the phone down and looked at her the way he had the night on the balcony, steady, no calculation left in it that she could find. "It doesn't get bigger," he said. "It gets quieter. That's what winning actually feels like, once the noise stops." Priya called again a week later, this time about something that had nothing to do with Bellamy. "The marriage license," she said. "Legally, given everything that's happened, the assault charge, the timeline, you'd have grounds to dissolve the contract cleanly. No penalties. No clauses. Clean exit, if you still wanted one." Anaya sat with that a long moment, phone against her ear, watching Do-hyun across the room reading something on his own screen, unaware he was being discussed. "Priya," she said. "Tear up page 19. "Which part of it?" "All of it." She watched Do-hyun look up, catching something in her tone, and held his eyes while she finished the sentence. "I don't need a clause to tell me what I already decided." She hung up before Priya could ask anything else, and didn't look away from Do-hyun's face while he worked out, slowly, exactly what she'd just done. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know." "Then why?" "Because you told me once you wanted this to stay my choice." She crossed the room toward him, no rehearsal in it this time, nothing performed. "This is me making it. Not because a contract says I have to. Because I don't want the version of this where I don't." Whatever he said back, she didn't need to remember the exact words for it to matter. Some things stopped needing to be perfect the moment they stopped being pretense. That's the story, my lovelies. Anaya got her ending, not the one she planned, but the one she chose. But some contracts leave more behind than the people who signed them. Bellamy's not the only name that came up in that courtroom. And I haven't told you everything about what Do-hyun's father actually lost 11 years ago. If you want to know whether there's more waiting in Seoul, subscribe and let me know in the comments. My lovelies decide what happens next, always have.